Om. What do you, Abhinav?
Om Shri Sai Ram, offering our most humble and reverential pranams at the divine lotus feet of our most beloved Bhagwan. As we approach the Ishwarama Day today, we are blessed to have amongst us Dr. M. Sainath. Dr. M. Sainath is an alumnus of the Sri Sathya Sai Institute of Higher Learning and hails from the city of Hyderabad. He joined Swami's Institute in the year 1985 to pursue his BSc in Physics course and then went on to complete his MSc in Physics and PhD in Nuclear Physics. With the divine blessings of our most beloved Bhagwan, he joined as a faculty in the Department of Physics in the year 1995 and went on to become an assistant professor in the department. After more than 2 decades of staying in the divine presence, he moved on to Hyderabad to take care of his ailing father as per the instructions of our most beloved Bhagwan. He went on to handle many important roles and responsibilities in several educational institutions in Hyderabad, including professor in Aurora College and Methodist College of Engineering and Technology, and was also the director of campus for Bearis Institute of Technology, Mangalore. Till recently, he was holding dual deanship in Rajiv Gandhi University of Technology and a Government of Telangana University. He was also the dean of he's currently the dean for ICFI Group, Hyderabad. He has about 70 research publications and symposium communications to his credit and is a member of many professional bodies. Dr. M. Sainath was a very active member of coordination committees for cultural activities, sports meet, and Gram Seva. And even now, he is actively involved with the academic programs of Swami's University as Prashanti Nilayam. Moreover, he was blessed by Bhagwan to speak in the divine presence on more than 50 occasions, major ones being the Dashera festival every year and other festivities and Prashanti Nilayam. I would not request Dr. M. Sainath to share his thoughts with us.
Uh, Om Shri Sai Ram. I offer my most prayerful pranams at Bhagwan's lotus feet, sisters and brothers of the Sai family. It gives me great happiness to be able to share this evening with everyone. I remember the golden time when I was in Dharmakshetra a few years back to give a Samarpan talk, and it was a very momentous occasion for me because I had some very happy memories at that time. I'm happy once again to connect with my brothers and sisters in Mumbai and from many other places. Let's take the next few minutes to share some memorable thoughts, experiences with Bhagwan, and let us try to see whether we can benefit in some way from these experiences. I would like to take everyone back a few decades. That was the time when Bhagwan used to come to the sports field on a regular basis, and we even used to have exhibition matches, so that we could spend. It's basically a opportunity created by the students so that we can have some moments with Bhagwan. Swami was so kind that he would actually spend some time there. I still remember the cricket matches we used to have. Just for the information of this August gathering, Swami actually never liked cricket, and half the time was spent, in him making some jokes there at the stadium where the bowler would suddenly stop because there was a huge laughter coming from the back, and Swami from there he would signal, no, 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 you play, you play. So it was these were occasions where everything used to be in such, it's almost like a house where everyone was laughing and playing with each other. So this was one such occasion, and we had arranged a volleyball exhibition match for Swami to see, and everyone knows how volleyball is played basically. So Swami was keenly watching, and the students were playing with the volleyball. They were passing, they were serving, and everything. And Swami was keenly watching. And that evening in the portico, there was a discussion about this game. And Swami asked all the students, did you notice something very interesting in the volleyball? It has a very close parallel to your own spiritual journey. So we were all surprised, like perhaps Swami is one of the greatest reason why students used to enjoy being around Swami was when he was amongst youngsters like us in those days, he would be like a youngster. He would talk the language, which we would be able to relate to very easily. And we were all surprised, how can a volleyball game be linked to spirituality? Then Swami said, how do you play the game? And then we said, Swami, one person serves, and then, we make sure that the ball doesn't hit the ground. Then Swami started telling, you see what happens when the person who serves the ball, after he serves the ball, his teammates go to any extent. They fall, they scratch their legs, they hurt their hands, but their only aim is that that ball should never touch the ground. So after the person serves the ball, his teammates combine together to see, they do everything in their powers to see that the ball never hits the ground. In the process, they even get injured. So there are three lessons that you can draw from this entire game of volleyball sequence. The first one is individual effort. How everyone knows that when the individual struggles, the team prospers. So the individual effort is very important. The second one is obstacles in life. Just like this team is trying to see that the ball doesn't hit the ground, there is the other team which is trying to see that the ball will hit the ground. At another occasion, Swami was telling, many people pray to me. Of course, Swami was saying, that's not me. So Swami was saying, many people pray to me that, Swami, remove obstacles in my life. Swami, in my office, I have kind of people, whom I cannot bear to see the sight of. I just cannot withstand their company. Swami said, see, expecting a life without obstacles is your foolishness. It is not the other person's mistake. Life means obstacles. And why are these obstacles there? These obstacles are there because unless you clear, it's like a hurdle race, Swami said. Race low. Fences or race, when you start running, obstacles are there. The faster you clear the obstacles, you cannot say, I don't want the obstacle, remove this. You will lose the race. So Swami said, you have to cross the obstacles and only then you will reach the finishing line. So Swami said, expecting a life where there are no obstacles is your foolishness. Do not blame the world for it. So this is the second thing. The first one was individual effort. Second thing is obstacles in life. Third one is team effort. Now, how are these three related to our spiritual journey? Let's see one by one. Let's see the individual effort in the first place. Individual effort, I think all of us can easily relate to it. It's our sadhana. In our spiritual journey, our sadhana plays the first role, and that is our individual effort. And there are many lessons given. I would like to focus on the 3P principle. The 3P principle, which Swami often mentions: patience, perseverance, and purity. But I will try to deal with these three in a way which was appealing to us when we were students, from our experiences at that time with students. So patience is the first one. I remember once an elder person, the elderly devotee, asked Swami, Swami, which is the most important quality a sincere devotee must have? Swami first and foremost said patience. We all know how many times gurus make their sishyas wait for literally eternity before they even impart one single mantra. Our scriptures are replete with such stories. So the most sincere bhakta is therefore the guru looks for his patience. Does this person have the patience? Does this person willing to wait for the time, for the moment? So patience is the first quality which we look for, the guru looks for when he is seeking a spiritual sadhaka. And Swami always says that's the first principle which we should follow. I remember when Swami was talking to the students, he was talking about Lord Krishna and Arjuna. Everyone knows that Krishna and Arjuna literally knew each other for several years. They met during Draupadi's Swayamvara, and the relationship lasted for years together, went through the 14 years of Vanavasa and all those things, lasted through the Kurukshetra battle. But it was only after so many years that Krishna decided to teach the immortal Bhagavad Gita to Lord Arjuna. And where did he do it? in the midst of a battle where people were shouting at each other, elephants were trumpeting, there was nothing but clamor and noise and confusion all around. In the middle of this, Lord Krishna chose to impart the Bhagavad Gita to Arjuna. So question was asked by a sadhaka, why on earth did Lord Krishna select such a moment and such a scenario to impart such a holy scripture like the Bhagavad Gita? And the answer comes because that was the right time for Arjuna. In the past till then, Arjuna looked upon Krishna only like his cousin. He never saw Krishna like a god. Number two, Arjuna never faced a situation where he would possibly appreciate what Lord Krishna was telling. If Krishna would have started teaching Bhagavad Gita at that time to Arjuna, Arjuna say, why do I need this now, Lord Krishna? Forget. First of all, he was not looking at Krishna like a teacher or like a guru. He was looking upon him like a cousin. Why would Arjuna accept anything like so symbolic and so deep and aesthetic like Bhagavad Gita if Krishna would have taught him at any other place? So, and third most important, in the thick of the battle, in desperation and in total virakti bhava, that is when Arjuna tells Krishna, Anyatha Saranam Nasti. And that is when Krishna tells, now you are my disciple, you are in the right frame of mind to receive the Bhagavad Gita. So these are several factors which the divinity takes into consideration before he decides to confer a blessing on the devotee. So patience is the first thing we should look for. I remember once a devotee had come to Bhagwan. If I'm not mistaken, a similar parlance exists even in the life of Shirdi Sai Baba. A devotee came to Swami, because this I was a witness to it, that's why. So a devotee came, an apparent very important person, and he was made to sit in the front, and he was asking Mr. Chiranjeev, that time Mr. Kutumbarao was in charge of the ashram. So he was asking Mr. Kutumbarao, when can Swami see me? I have to go. And Mr. Kutumbarao humbly said, sir, getting you till here is in our hands. After this, it is in Baba's hands. So when he calls you and when he talks to you, I am in no position to tell. And this man waited for 10 minutes, and Swami was, Swami is a master at making people wait. So, he very tantalizingly would come out of the door, talk to the person next to this important person, talk to the person next to that important person, but make it a point not to see this person. He was getting more and more agitated, more and more agitated. Then he went inside. After 10 minutes, again he came out. And in the meantime, this person asked Mr. Kayaldas, who was sitting there, Bhai, when will Swami call me? I have to go. And Mr. Kayaldas told, sir, not in my hands. I'm sorry. You'll have to wait. Then after that, Swami came out and this person took matters into his own hands. He got up and said, Swami, I have to ask a very important question of you. I'm going through a very tough patch. I need your help to get over this tough patch. In front of everyone, of course, Swami has a style of telling. Swami told, you're not willing to wait for even half an hour for me to talk to you. And you want me to solve a problem for you that has been eating you your entire life. Tell me, how is it possible, he said. Patience. If we are not able to devote half an hour of our time for God, how can we expect Him to stand by us for the rest of our lives? It's as simple as that. It's a matter of equations. So therefore, this is a very important virtue which we need to pick up. That is about patience. A very important incident which I faced personally and learned from Swami is, it's very important that we should not pressurize Swami into doing what we want. He will do it. He will do it. But what do we know? Maybe we are missing something better in our lives. Unable to bear our torture, he may give it. He may give us what we want, but it's entirely likely we have lost something more, far more precious. But at the same time, it is important for us to believe that whatever he does it at the right time, the right way. As students, we used to play in our Jaishankar is here. I remember he also was in the cricket team with us. Of course, I was a faculty member already. We used to play cricket together. Students have a very good playground where we used to play cricket. Of course, in our days, the ground was not exactly level. It was a little bumpy. It was not very strange to find students getting hit by the cricket ball, and with bandages and all, going to the mandir. And, Swami castorizing us, for being careless, but at the same time ensuring that the doctor is there to take care. So father will danda dikhayega or mother idhar care bhi dikhayegi, dono karenge udhar. So both used to happen. So, one day we were playing a cricket, and this was the inter-house championship. I was batting, and opposite me was one of the most fearsome bowler in the institute. His name was Hariharan. Unfortunately, he is passed away. He's no longer with us. But he was the most fearsome bowler. Like, his bowling was very fast. Very fast is understatement, and I was facing him. So before this, a preamble has to be given. I suddenly started getting a problem of double vision. Like early morning, Suprabhatam bell would ring. I would get up. I would see two doors, two windows, and two of my classmates. Everyone double, double, double. So I used to shut my eyes for some time, and I used to sit there, and then it would go slowly on its own. So, but this problem was there with me. I said, okay, fine. Maybe I'm feeling sleepy. I'm not getting proper sleep. If I close my eyes and sit, it is going. Say, why make a big noise about it and all that? So I kept quiet. It went on and on. On this day, it paid me back. So just when I was facing the most fearsome bowler, I saw two Hariharans and two balls. And I didn't know which ball to hit. So I just in that short time, I just said Sairam and ducked my head and turned my head. With a sickening whack, the ball cracked into the back of my head. It was so loud that people could hear me in the Shanti Vedika, and I just collapsed on the wickets like that. So people came running at me, they were trying to wake me up. I was knocked out fully. They didn't know what happened. We didn't have many hospital facilities also. They started shouting, Sairam, Sairam, applied Vibhuti on me through water. And after maybe 10 minutes of anxious moments, I opened my eyes. Where am I? So then they looked at me. They said, first, let us test this fellow, whether his brain's around. They said, can you recognize us? I said, yeah, but why are you staring at me? Then they said, we are not staring at you. You are lying on the ground. Then I got up and I saw, yes, what had happened. Then I started feeling the pain. Then they told me what happened. They told me enough of cricket for you. They took me off. They took me to the hospital. Dr. Alreja was there. So he took one look at my head. Oh, you're fine. Nothing is wrong. That laconic voice of his, and he sent me off. He gave me some painkillers and sent me off. Everything is fine. The next morning, I got up with some kind of a growth coming. Now, this growth was horribly painful. I could make out that it was coming from inside my head. It was not a bruise. It was coming from inside there. Remember, I was already having a double vision problem. So then this double vision problem intensified, I didn't know what to do. And the growth started becoming worse and worse. And Dr. Alreja one day punctured it, but nothing happened. The problem persisted. I was writing letter after letter to Swami. And until then, Swami was talking to me all the time. When I started showing him the letter, he would not come near. He just avoided. So I just avoided, wouldn't take the letter. I didn't know how to tell him. And then one fine morning, I got up with some sticky fluid coming out of the wound from there. And, I was rushed to the hospital. I had fainted. I had rushed to the hospital. Dr. Alreja did some little bit of procedure here, and he put a big bandage over here. But this bandage is something Swami couldn't avoid even if he wanted. Like, everybody was teasing me saying, when did you start putting flower in your hair? Because, it was exactly at this position. But Swami found a way to avoid even that. Then I got fed up. I said, enough, Swami, you have taken care of me so wonderfully, and this is a time when I need you. You're choosing to keep quiet. Maybe I was destined to suffer this. Maybe a part of my karma is flowing out. Swami, I accept whatever you have given. Only one prayer, Swami, give me the strength to bear the pain. Don't take away the distance, Swami, and don't talk to me. It is okay, but Swami, please give me the strength to bear the pain. You don't even have to take my letter. You will not believe it, sisters and brothers. From that night, I felt very peaceful. It was like as if a big load had been taken off my shoulders. I was suddenly feeling very peaceful. It's like something, okay, I have given it up to God. I have given it up to God. I don't have to worry about this anymore. And maybe about a week later, the room leaders were called for a meeting. So I was a room leader. So we all went inside. And I was sitting at the back. I was listening to what Swami said. And the topic came to Suprabhatam. Then Swami said, boys find it very difficult to get up in the morning, lazy fellows. Some of the room leaders also are like that. They don't get up in the morning. But there are also some good room leaders. Look at how Swami diverts the topic. There are also some good room leaders. Now, please don't take it that I'm blowing my trumpet here. This is an incident and an experience I'm narrating, that's all. So Swami said, look at Sainath, for example. For the last 3 months, he has been having double vision. I never mentioned double vision to anyone. Never. Swami knew. He has been having double vision. Whenever he gets up in the morning, he's having trouble. And he even has this problem. Despite that, he gets up in the morning and he goes for Suprabhatam. That is the sincerity I'm expecting from boys. Then he looked at me and he said, come. And it was said with such a love, I burst out crying. And I was trying to make him draw attention to me for such a long time, suffering such in horrible pain. And he was ignoring me. And now he made up for it in a jiffy. He said, come here. When I went, he touched the back of my head like this. Nepiga onda, he asked. Is it paining? I said, not anymore, son. It's gone. And Swami said, Potundi. Yemi kaadu. Leave it to me, it will go. And a few days after that, he took photograph. There's a photographers also in the internet, also in the WhatsApp group, you'll find. Pallav was there, Krishna was there, I was there, C.V. Subhash and Vasudevan. We were all there in that. It's there on WhatsApp. Some student posted it. What they did know was I was having a bandage at the back of my head at that time. And Swami, all the time, he was touching that while taking the photograph. His hand was here only. And you will not believe it, sisters and brothers, for next morning, I started improving. The pain subsidized and my eyesight returned. I had no more double vision issues. And actually, when I went home for the holidays in the summer, just to make sure, I went to the neurosurgeon to get an EEG done. And he took one look and said, there's nothing in your head. Whether it's a tongue-in-cheek statement or whether he was actually telling the truth, I have no idea. But he said, there's nothing in your head. How did the problem vanish? Then I recollected. I made every possible human effort to make Swami come and talk to me, to take care of my problem. He would not do it. But he did it when I left things to him. I left things to him. I left things to him for him to do in a way which he thought correct and appropriate. And that is when he stepped in. So this is what patience is all about. We have to be able to let Swami take hold of our lives. We have to have that confidence. He will do it in the time when he thinks it has to be done. That is about patience. The next one is about perseverance. Perseverance is often synonymous with determination. What do we have to persevere about? This is a very interesting story narrated by Mrs. Geeta Ram. I think all of us know her. She was once speaking about snakes and ladders. All of us play that game. So this game was being played. Now, how does Swami derive a lesson even from such a game? It so happened that Mrs. Geeta Ram's house, when he was a small child, Swami used to visit their house in Bangalore. So, and as it would happen, the elders in the house would bundle all the children in a room upstairs so that they don't disturb the people down. So all the kids used to be thrown into one room and given all games. I said, you handle yourself. Don't come down because Swami will get disturbed. So they were sitting up one day and they were playing snakes and ladders. All of a sudden, they were shocked to see the door open and Swami walked in. And Swami was actually down talking to elders. For some reason, he came up, and behind him, a couple of other elders also came in with Swami. So children were very, when they saw Swami. Then Swami said, what are you doing? Swami himself was not very elderly, like his body was just about in his 50s or 40s at that time. So they said, Swami, we are playing snakes and ladders. Can I join you? Swami asked. They said, no. Because whenever you play, you only win. So we don't want you to join us. And Swami said, no, I'll play normally. So they said, okay, we are playing. So they played, everything happened, all the coins. And after that, Swami looked at the elders and he said, the snakes and ladders game, it teaches you a very valuable lesson. What is it? See, life is like the game. Sometimes you have ladders that take you up in life. Sometimes you have snakes that pull you down in life. But remember one thing, as long as you have the dice in your hand, one day you will reach the top and you will succeed. The dice is like God. So as long as you have God in your hands with you, you have that perseverance that Swami is there with me in all the stages of my life. One day you will cross these barriers of snakes and ladders and reach the top and you will succeed. That is how you must keep God with you. Persevere. There is nothing to get scared and give up in the midway. Perseverance is what God expects. It's like an obstacle race. So if we fall, we get up and cross once again. We believe that God is with us. So perseverance is a very, very important aspect of our individual effect. And of course, the next one is purity. All the sadhana that we do has only one aim, Swami said, and that is to purify our heart. Why should we purify the heart? What is so special about our heart means not the four chambered heart and the physical heart. Swami always refers to the spiritual heart. What is so special about the spiritual heart? The spiritual heart is where God resides. Hridayavasi, we call it the Hridayavasi. That means in every individual, God resides in this spiritual heart. And that is the seat he would like to occupy. We have often heard Swami say that it is not a single seat, it's a single seat sofa. Either the world resides or the God resides. The feeling here is that we should know that God resides in our heart. This story, which was narrated by Swami, it's a little humorous in nature, but it drives home a very valuable truth. It's about Draupadi. We all know that Mother Draupadi was Vastrapaharan was going on in the court. Nobody was coming to help her. So she started praying to Lord Krishna. So she called out, "Oh Mathuravasi," Krishna didn't come. "Oh Brindavana Sanchari," Krishna didn't come. Then she was calling all kind of names, Krishna was not coming. Finally, out of tiredness, she just said, "Oh Hridayavasi," and bang, Krishna appears. Immediately he appears. So in the Vanavasa time, once when Krishna was visiting the Draupadi and the Pandavas, Draupadi asked him, "See, why do you wait for such a long time for me to call you before you came? I have been calling you for such a long time. You never turned up." And then Krishna tells, "What do you want me to do? You tell Mathura Vasi, I have to go to Mathura and I have to come back. Vrindavana Sanchari, I have to go to Vrindavan and I have to come back. So when you told Hridayavasi, I'm right there. I came immediate. I didn't have to go anywhere." A humorous, but see the tender significance, a deep secret that this story conveys. If we can call him Vaikunthavasa, we can call him Palakadali Pai, Seshasayanupupai, all stories are there. These are basically our way of expressing our happiness, but they should never confuse us into thinking that God is somewhere else. He is always with us. He is always with us, inside us. So therefore, it is very, very important that we imagine and believe that God is our Hridayavasi. So how does one attain this purity? Swami always used to tell us students, Brahmacharya is very important if you want to attain purity. Brahmacharya often is translated very loosely in English language as celibacy. The answer is wrong. Brahmacharya doesn't mean celibacy. One of the requirements for Brahmacharya is celibacy, but what kind of celibacy? Celibacy basically means abstention. You have to abstain from what? Not just from physical pleasures, it's also mental. It's basically sense control. Brahmacharya therefore means it's all about control. It's about control, it's about moderation. I remember once Swami, when MBA program first began in the Satyasai Institute of Higher Learning, Swami blessed the first few batches in such an extent. Every Sunday he would call them and he would actually give discourses to them. Every Sunday. And it would 9:30, we would give Aarti and would come back 10 o'clock, it would start, it would go on till 11:30. Every Sunday there was a discourse. And Swami spoke about such a range of topic. It's not just about spirituality, but it was about how to link practical management to spirituality. Some of the best lessons I've heard at that time. There maybe an occasion demands I can share some of those with you, because those of us who are so-called speaker boys, that means we had given talks in the foyer, we were called the speaker boys. So we were also told you can also join the lecture along with the MBA boys. So at that time, I was fortunate enough to see some excellent expositions about several secrets about spirituality from Swami. One of the time was he carried out a beautiful experiment. There is a photograph of this also. So maybe some of the alumni whom you know will be able to produce that photograph. It is very much there. Swami was talking about this brahmacharya and about how it helps to attain the purity of our mind and heart. And he materialized a medallion. He waved his hand in front of all of us and he materialized a medallion. I have to explain this medallion to you because it's important. Generally, we don't focus much on Swami's creations. There is a story behind it actually why Swami himself expects us not to do it. In Kodaikanal, once Swami took the ring from one of the devotees. It was a green ring like this with a green stone. Swami put that ring in front of us and he asked us, boys, what color is this ring? So we said, Swami, it is green. And Swami said, what is wrong with you people? Take a look again. It was white. Then we stared, how can it be possible? Even the person whose ring it was shocked. I never had a white ring. He said, yeah, but eyes cannot deceive you. We said, yes, Swami, it looks like it's a white ring. Then again we said, you people have gone crazy. What is wrong with your eyes? You see, it is green. Why are you calling it white? Yes, it was back in green again. And then he said, now tell me what color this is. By the time we had learned a lesson with Swami, whatever color you want, it is that color. Then Swami said, you see, as long as you focus on the creation, you will fall into delusions like this. Look at the creator behind. Understand that the creator is behind the creation and he can do anything that he wants. So if you look at the creator, the creation ceases to make any impact on you. You don't feel moved, you don't feel involved, you don't feel influenced by the creation because that is the nature of creation. It is always changing. It will keep changing. So as long as you focus on that creation, you will keep falling into delusion, you will keep getting confused. Look at the creator, he never changes. So therefore, we are taught actually by Swami many times not to bother much about the creations that he makes, the rings, the watches, etc. But in this case, the experiment revolved around this creation once again. And so he materialized that medallion. And Swami told us, all of you take a very close look at the medallion. So the medallion was circulated around the room. It went to each one of our hands. We touched it. It was pretty big, about maybe 2 inches in length and maybe 1 inch in diameter. It was oval shaped. It had 3 layers of precious stones, diamonds, then green sapphire and red colored stone. Inside that, there was an oval shaped photograph of Swami. And Swami said, everybody has seen it. Dr. Kailash Kumar, who was our English faculty at that time, he had retired from the army. He took it around actually. And he gave it back to Swami. He said, Swami, everybody has seen it. Swami said, everybody has seen it. He said, yes, Swami, everybody has seen it. And he put it in front of our eyes like this, blew on it 3 times. Something happened. We know something happened. What happened, nobody knows. But then he told Dr. Kailash Kumar once again, now take it around. And when he took it around, trust me, not only had the shape changed, the stones also had gone. What was oval earlier now became a dollar-shaped medallion with only diamonds and Swami's photo. Oh, we were all stunned. In front of our eyes, such a fantastic miracle. Swami, you are God. Swami, you are great. This is divine power, all that we started. Then Swami said, if you think what I did just now is divinity, there is no bigger fool than you on earth. I would like to pause here and tell one thing to our sisters and brothers. Many times, Swami's detractors have accused him of being a cheap magician. What they never know, never bothered to know, Swami himself never bothered about these things. And he never, ever said these miracles are why I am divine. As this one. So he said, if you think that just by changing this medallion I am divine, there is no bigger fool than earth on you, than you. If you follow brahmacharya, even you can do these cheap tricks. Now this is the greatness. He said, if you follow brahmacharya, even you can do these cheap tricks. What you saw was nothing but a cheap trick. It is a visiting card I display before you all so that you will one day learn to know and demand and respect what I actually want to give you. It is nothing more than a cheap trick, which even you can do. How can you do it? It is through sheer brahmacharya, sense control. So he said, in this sense control, when you have the purity of mind. When you have the purity of mind, for your matter and energy start to become equaling one. Transforming one from the other is no big deal. You can easily do it. At another occasion, I remember inside Purnchandra Auditorium, the boys used to exercise. So we had some dumbbells there, which we used to keep it carefully hidden from Swami. We didn't want Swami to again ask us funny questions about what the dumbbell is all about. But one day, unfortunately, I was a little careless and Swami saw it. And Swami asked one of the cooks who used to come, "What is this?" And he said, "Swami, it's a dumbbell." So he asked, "What is that?" He said, "Swami, Sainath sir exercises with that." So Swami said, "Abba." So evening when I came back, he looked at me. "It seems you exercise every day." I said, "Yes, Swami." "So you're that strong?" I said, "No, Swami." Then Swami said, "Okay, let us see." So there were three of us boys. Two boys used to come. Three of them used to come to sleep in the night, and two of us used to be in Ponchandra. And Swami said, "Okay, let us test." So this was getting into slippery ground now for us. So he came and he said, "You do one thing. I will stand behind the door. You push. Okay, you push the door from outside. I will push against the door from inside. Let us see." And we said, "Swami, no need." So Swami said, "You do it." Because there was a lesson going to come. I would normally not share this lesson, this story, but there was a very important lesson coming behind that is linked to this brahmacharya concept. So the two of us, both of us physically, we used to pride ourselves as being pretty strong. We pushed with all our might, and Swami used just his left hand, and the door wouldn't move. And in between, to make matters worse for us, he opened the door slightly. "Are you pushing?" Then again he closed the door. We gave up. We were struggling till sweat is coming out here, and Swami is holding the door with his left hand, and he is not even feeling to push. He's opening it and, in fact, asking us, "Are you pushing or not?" So we gave up and we told Swami, "We give up." Then Swami said, "You see, what is the strength you're having?" We said, "Swami, this is divine strength." And Swami caught my ear and he said, "This is divine strength? Divinity is nowhere near what you have seen. This is pure brahmacharya. This is pure brahmacharya." I don't know how many of us recollect the story of Madhvacharya. Madhvacharya was a great saint. And he had a challenge at one of the best known wrestlers of his time. He challenged him to squeeze his neck and stop the chanting of Om Namo Narayana from his throat. That wrestler couldn't do it. It's not that Madhvacharya was a giant, hefty person. He was a normal looking saint. But he could not, the wrestler, how much ever he squeezed the throat of Madhvacharya, he couldn't make Madhvacharya stop chanting Om Namo Narayana. So Swami said, Swami's physical frame is very thin, but he could hold two of us against. And Swami said, "You think this is divinity? It is not divinity. That is pure brahmacharya. You practice it, even you can do this." Once again, this is the second lesson. So what does Swami expect? Brahmacharya, this display of extraordinary physical strength, display of transmuting matter to energy and energy back to matter. These are nowhere near what the divinity Swami expects us to follow. These are all tricks and these are all the strengths that we pick up on our way of a spiritual journey. A sincere brahmacharya, if we follow, we will automatically acquire these promises on our own. And the true seeker will not be bothered by these powers. It is only the false seeker who gets influenced by these powers, gives up his journey on the way, and decides to enjoy the powers that he or she has experienced. So that's why Swami said, this is brahmacharya. And how do we know that brahmacharya is basically being followed by us? A question once again, which was asked by one of the students. And Swami said, he was asked, Swami, how do we know that we are on a brahmacharya, where our purity of heart and mind is being worked on? Swami said, your first indication is you will start seeing a unity in your thought, word, and deed. You don't have to struggle. You don't have to act to create that unity. You will discover that it is coming naturally to you. If you are in that stage, my dear boy, understand that you are on the path to practicing brahmacharya. So unity of thought, Trikarana Suddhi. Swami has told it so many times in different occasions. Trikarana Suddhi. When brahmacharya, the sincerity of purity of purpose is practiced, the first practical significance of it, the practical symbol of it is we start seeing unity in our thought, word, and deed. And this Trikarana Suddhi, once again, Swami was, to what extent he means, is related it with a very good Chinnakatha at one point of time. It seems there was a very famous scholar, very experienced and proficient in his scholarship. He came to a king's court and he showed his scholarship. The king was very impressed with him. So he said, "You are so learned, master, I can, the best gift possible. I'll present you my own robes." He was so happy with the person. So the king's royal robes, he got one set and presented to the scholar. Scholar took it as a great prasad. The king himself presenting his own personal royal robes to him. So he took very good care of it. So one day he washed the clothes, dried it on the river banks, and he sat down to do his personal sadhana. All of a sudden, a gust of wind took the king's robes and pushed it into the river, and the robe started flowing. So the scholar started running after it. Ayo, king's robes, ayo, it's getting washed away. And he ran. And unfortunately for him, the king's washerman was downstream washing the king's clothes. He recognized the king's robe. But the washerman didn't know that the king himself had presented these robes to the scholar. So he saw the robes and he saw the scholar running behind, and he caught the scholar and he shouted at him, "How dare you rob the king's robes?" And the scholar said, "No, it is my own. The king himself gave me." And the washerman said, "No, you are a robber, you are a thief." And he started hitting the scholar. So the scholar started shouting, "Narayana, save me." And he started fighting back. So they were trading blows after blows with each other. In Vaikuntha, meanwhile, something very funny was happening. Mother Lakshmi was seated on Adisesha. Lord Vishnu got up, went till the doors of Vaikuntha, came back again. Again went to the doors of Vaikuntha, came back again. Again went, again came back. So Mother Lakshmi was watching and she said, "Natha, what are you doing? My lord, what are you doing?" Then he said, "I'm trying to go and save the scholar." Then Mother Lakshmi said, "Why don't you go?" He says, "That's the whole problem. Every time he calls Narayana, I'm getting up and going, but he is hitting back in between, so I'm coming back. So whenever he calls Narayana, I'm going. But the moment I reach the door, he's again hitting and fighting back, so I'm coming back. So if he says, 'Narayana, save me,' and surrenders to me, I would have gone and saved him." So this is the Trikarana Suddhi problem over here. So when we say, "God save us, God help us, God do this, God do that," and all that, but now this is a very interesting session actually, about what we call as, does that mean that human effort should not take place? Very interesting question. What I am saying appears to give the message that if we say, "God, my Lord, you are everything, I will not do any effort," then it is okay. I'm sure many of us would have got that doubt, because I got that doubt also. So in fact, I had the courage to ask Swami once, "Swami, when you say this story and many times that you should surrender to God and God will take up all your things, all your trouble, all your life, then why is it you also expect us to participate in Purusha Prayatna?" Why? Swami had such a wonderful answer. He said there are two categories of people. If you are fully into Trikarana Suddhi and believe that God is the one who is controlling your life, totally surrender to Him, God will take up the responsibility. But if you are halfway somewhere, wherein you are expecting the fruits of your karma, now this is the key word, you are expecting the fruits of your karma, you are involving in karma with some bit of selfish interest and returns in mind, do not expect the Lord to come and save you and run your life for you. You are responsible for your own karma. Purusha Prayatna, therefore, is as long as we believe that we are bound by karma, that we are to get some kind of results from our actions. When we are concerned about the results of our action, as long as we are in this domain, Purusha Prayatna is a must. For this category of people, God's grace plus individual effort does the job. For these, not that God abandons these kind of people, please don't get it wrong. Swami very clearly mentioned, for these kind of people, Purusha Prayatnam plus Daivadhinam. That means God's grace plus your individual effort. For these category of people, this will work. Gives the best results. For the first category of people who believe that there is totally no karma is there, everything is surrendered in word, thought, and deed to God, those kind of people, only God's grace will help. They don't need to involve themselves in Purusha Prayatna. So Swami said, you cannot expect to be in the second category and expect the fruits of the first category. Like the washer, the scholar. Narayana saved me with all the purity of his sadhana he called. That is why Lord Narayana moved. But you are hitting back. You're not willing to receive any blows from the washerman. So that kind of people, divine effort, he will give you the strength to hit back and he'll keep quiet. That's all. But he is not going to come and save. So this is very, very important over here. Dharma, artha, kama, moksha. That is also the difference between duty and dharma. Four purusharthas. Our spiritual parlance itself tells us that there are four purusharthas for every human being. Dharma, artha, kama, moksha. Moksha comes last. Dharma comes first. That means the first step is dharma. With dharma comes kama. The artha, sorry, dharma, after that comes artha. That means earn your money in a dharmic way. It is permitted. There's nothing wrong in that. Earn the money. Dharma is first. Artha, earn your money in a dharmic way. Kama. Kama is often mistaken to be lust. No. Kama is basically our responsibility to whoever is depending on us. Desire with an intention to fulfill a responsibility to whoever depends on us. So that's a complete definition of kama. The desire to help and poshinchadam, sustain the people who are depending on us. That is kama. Kama also should be satisfied with dharma. Dharma is first again. If you do the artha is money is earned with dharma, kama is satisfied with dharma, then moksha comes automatically. Now, this is the path prescribed as the Chatur Purushartha path for all the seekers. What about the person who has surrendered to God? That this is for those of us who believe duty should be done sincerely. What about the people who do selfless seva? Selfless seva, not normal seva, selfless seva. For them, dharma directly leads to moksha. There is no karma, there is no artha in between, because the definition of seva itself is nothing for myself. It is for others. So why do you have to earn? Artha is not required. Why do you have to have a desire? Not required, because desire also is for me and those depending on me. So both of them vanish. So duty means you have to go from dharma to artha to kama to moksha. Seva means from dharma directly you go to moksha. That is the difference which many times Swami explained to the students. So coming to this, therefore, we see that Purusha Prayatna is therefore essential as long as we are bound by our duty, for whatever be the reasons. And many times I've heard some scholars and learned people actually say that duty is ulterior, it is inferior to dharma. Swami was the first one who told me that duty is not inferior. Do not feel bad that you are forced to do your duty. Duty is also very much needed. But how do you do your duty? With dharma. Then there is nothing wrong in it. So don't feel, we should not feel guilty that we are not doing seva and we are always doing duty. That is also not a problem. So I mean, cautioned us many times, do not feel guilty about it. It is very much necessary as long as dharma is attached to that. So this unity of thought, word and deed is the purity aspect which we see. So we have finished perseverance, we have finished purity. Now comes to the last part, that is a team effort. Now in this team effort is where will finally lead us to covering the topic of what I was trying to tell you, that is from the Sakshatkar to the Nirakar through sadhana and aradhana. So this section is going to lead to that particular thing. It required a preamble of the previous two, which is why I covered it. Now, what is a team effort? It's like the game of volleyball. Now, the question can be asked here. At one side, we are saying it's about internal. A team, on the other hand, is external. So what role does a team play in my spiritual progress? A company of somebody external, how is it going to help me in my spiritual progress? In fact, Swami himself he says, don't avoid company. Instead, he says, choose your company carefully. Tell me your company and tell you what you are. That means company is not avoidable. When we are in our duty, company cannot be avoided. It will be there. But Swami's caution is, choose your company carefully. Why? Tell me your company and I will tell you what you are. In a because we tend to get shaped and tend to acquire the qualities of the kind of company that we keep in. So we have to be very careful so that we don't slip in our journey. So coming to this, in fact, there was a very humorous incident once. Kodaikanal, when we go with Swami, it's not uncommon for Swami to sit in the bus along with the boys. So at such point of times, the car would go ahead of the bus and Swami would sit in the bus with the boys. So it was, we were going on one side. Invariably, Swami has a very hearty laugh at this. The poor devotees who are lining up on either side of the road don't know that Swami is not in the car and that he's in the bus. So they would be doing pranams like this to the car, and Swami would be having a hearty laugh in the bus because Swami is not there, he's here. And nobody would care about the bus. The moment the car went past them, they would turn back and they would go their way. A bus would go normally with nobody bothered about it. So Swami would, watch this, and once very humorously he told, you see what kind of fellows you are. Because I am sitting with you, I am losing my namaskars. Because the car is going away. Swami, everybody is doing namaskar to the car. No, nobody is doing namaskar to the bus. Company. The Swami said, see, because the car is associated with Swami, the car is getting namaskars. The bus is associated with you boys, nobody bothers about it. So you see, and I sat with you in this bus, nobody is bothering even about it. So you see, a very humorous incident, but look at the power of company association. When milk is added to water, milk loses its value. But when water is added to milk, it acquires the beauty of milk. It acquires the qualities of milk. So Swami many times used to tell us that's why you should be very careful of the kind of company you keep. And as long as you are bound by this concept of duty in this world, a company is unavoidable. I will come to that in greater detail as we go a little bit more and more. So the important question, therefore, is why do I need somebody external when you are asking me to look internal all the time? So before we go into that, there are a couple of very important concerns which we need to address and discuss. So if the physical exterior was not important in the first place in our spiritual pursuit, the first question is, why did the avatar himself come in the physical form? He could have come some abstract thing, only his voice audible at all times, a physical form not required anywhere. Why did that happen? And why is it that he enticed so many of us with that physical form, made us go mad after him, and pine for that loss even now? That is a very important thing we have to see. So I would like to narrate an incident. It's a very, the incident itself is an explanation for what I'm trying to tell. One day I was going for my haircut in the afternoon to the barber, and it was around 10:30 in the afternoon. And when I came back in the afternoon, Swami asked me, where were you going at 10:30? I said, Swami, I was going to the barber. Ideally speaking, we would expect the Jagat Guru to leave it at that, but no. Which barber did you go to? I said, Swami Chitra. By this time, I was beginning to wonder, what is this mundane questions he's asking me? Why is he so concerned about my barber? And then he said, Swami, I went to so-and-so barber. He was there. Did you go to him or did you ask him to come to you? This was getting even worse. I said, Swami, I only went to him. And then I was wondering, what is this mundane? That word mundane came up in my mind at least 5 times. After this asked this question, he looked at me smilingly like that. And he said, you know what? As long as you see Swami as his 5'4" frame, these questions will sound mundane to you. But if you look at the real Swami, you will start asking, how did he know where I was going at that time? You will start thinking about the omniscience of the Lord. That thought never came to you. All the time, the thought coming to you was mundane, 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 mundane. Swami said that is the difference of which Swami you are seeking. Is it this physical frame Swami or the real Swami? So this is where we all fall in the trap. Especially, those of us who had that close proximity with Bhagwan. Trust me, we are anything but saints. There were umpteen number of times when we fell flatly on our face, falling for these traps, which he would delightfully lay for us. Now, he used to enjoy laying these traps for us, and we used to gladly fall in that. But at the same time, there are lessons we learned, which today, if I'm able to share this with you, that incident is strong in my mind. I remember it. Whenever I miss a step, this comes immediately in front of me. So someday I hope to surmount these obstacles by remembering these very incidents. So that was a lesson he had planted in me. Someday it is going to help me. That of that I'm very sure. So it was nothing but mundane. It was a seed he had planted in me, which is going to germinate at some time. So however mundane it may look. So therefore, it is the which Swami are we trying to seek? Accordingly, we will see whether Swami is mundane or whether he is a teacher who is far excellent. So therefore, the real purpose is therefore we use that physical form to find the real Swami. And in that aspect, perhaps describing the physical form of Swami as a catalyst for us to reach our destination of going beyond the physical is, I think, a very good definition we can give. So a catalyst is needed. Those of us who know chemistry will know the catalyst is good for the reaction. It speeds up the process, but catalyst is not the process. The actual process is going from the destination to the goal. Going from the origin to the destination. A catalyst will speed up that process. That was the avatar. That was the physical form of the avatar, and that is what it was there. So that's the first question. What's the purpose of the physical avatar? It was basically a catalyst for us to speed us up on the spiritual path. Two, how do we look at Swami beyond the physical then? Fine, he's a catalyst. So how do we look at the real Swami then, who is beyond this physical form? Now this is the second concern. Especially now that Swami's physical form is not there, I think this concern assumes a very significant this thing. I would like to basically once again come back to what I started with. In 1989, we were going to Kodaikanal, and Swami purchased a new bus for us. And he was very happy with the bus. And one day before we were to depart, Swami showed us, all the eatables he had packed. Now, traveling with Swami means eatables, mainly. The kind of food he would pay. His greatest concern was, my boys are going to be famished. The entire back portion of the bus was crammed with food, tetra packs of juices, milk and everything, and we were staring at it. And this was all expected to be completed before the lunch break. Not to forget the breakfast also, which we are expected to have on the process. And he creates a clear warning, because once you get down in the lunch break, a fresh stock will arrive. We have to complete this before that. So, food was perhaps the thing which we all got terrified of by the time we completed it. So at least one thing Swami succeeded in doing was the virakti bhava towards food, he succeeded in all of us. So the food was packed, everything, and the back few rows were filled with eatables and everything, and we didn't know what to do. And Swami showed us, see, all the buses there, but Bangaru, when so much of space is occupied, there were 36 of us. If so much of space is occupied by eatables, where am I going to sit if I come in the bus? There's no place for me. Oh, we got very carried away with the devotional ethos and pathos, that we said, Swami, this entire bus is yours. You can sit wherever you want. We thought Swami is going to give us a pat on our back. Swami's face fell. He was upset with the answer. And he looked at us and he said, what am I going to do with the lifeless bus? Why don't you tell me you are mine? If you tell me you are mine, 36 of you in each of your hearts, Swami will travel. So there are 72 of us who can travel. Wherever you go, I travel with you. I don't have to depend on the lifeless bus. So that is what he wants all the time. So how do we look for Swami beyond the physical? You don't have to look. We just have to separate the dirt and obstacles. We will find him. He's already sitting there. We just have to find him. That's all. So this is the power of the human heart. It is the seat where the Lord resides, and this is where he actually expects us to find him, not in the world outside. Everything that we do in the world outside is always pointing at this. Look at the finer emotion and sentiment within, because that finer sentiment and that emotion is the God we are seeking. So this is a very important point. So the other day I was actually talking to the Sri Lankan devotees. One of the questions was asked by a devotee, when we say that God is one, why have these physical forms? Why have so many physical forms for the Lord? When we say that God is one, Why do we have so many forms like Shiva, Vishnu, Krishna, Rama, etc.? Why are we giving so much of importance to this physical aspect of the Lord? When all the time they are expecting us to look within, do these. Then Swami, in one of his discourses, said, I would like to read this out rather than speaking the essence of it. It's a very important statement Swami made. Swami said, I quote, in reality, when the bhakta is expected to look beyond the physical body, kith and kin, then how can you entangle God in such knots? Correct. Such explanations are needed to help man understand divinity in the right way. If the child is reluctant to swallow a pill, insert the pill in a banana and give it. He will swallow the pill and the fruit, but do not change the pill to suit the child's taste. You will never cure the illness. So that physical form is like the banana. So he is using that physical form as the banana to feed us the pill of spirituality. The pill of divinity is hidden in the banana called the physical form. So if he directly gives us the divinity, most of us may find it very difficult to swallow. It's bitter. It requires hard work. It requires sacrifice, which may not be ready. So he packs it in the plantain of the physical form of the avatar and he brings it as a package. So when we start desiring the fruit, physical form, when we get so attracted to the physical form, when we get enticed to the physical form of the Lord in the form of Sai Baba or Krishna or Rama and Vishnu and sing praises, pray to him, we are desiring, because hidden in that form is that pill of divinity, which will come to us automatically when we desire the form. So we therefore understand the physical form of the Lord is only to the extent where we comprehend the real divinity, which is hidden inside. We have to reach that goal. We cannot stop at appreciating the physical form. As Swami himself said many times, worshipping the physical form of God is just a means to tame the human emotion, a very important point. Any kind of worship that we do is just a means to tame the human emotion. Once the true glory of the Lord is experienced, these physical forms and their worships will cease to make any sense at all. They will not make any sense. We have gone beyond. In fact, Swami was speaking to some of the devotees once. He explained, he said, I quote, since you cannot swim across the flooded stream, you board a raft. A raft is a boat. So also, since you cannot master the nirguna, the formless one in one go, you resort to the saguna, the form with the attributes. So the saguna, the form with the attributes of the form of Lord Shiva, Lord Krishna, etc., these are all basically like a raft that is going to help us to cross the ocean and reach the nirguna, the destination. We cannot feel pleased with this boat and say, I want the boat, I'm happy. Our destination is there on the other side. The boat's job is to take us there. We have to go in the boat and we have to complete the journey from the saguna to the nirguna. So therefore, you resort to the saguna and struggle to swim across to the nirguna who is waiting on the other side. So when we have a boat, the boat has oars. What are the oars? Aradhana and Upasana. So Aradhana and Upasana are basically the oars which we apply to the boat of the saguna to reach the destination of nirguna. So nirguna, saguna, aradhana, and upasana. These are the four things that Swami mentions always come together. Upasana, aradhana, and saguna stop making sense when we reach the destination of nirguna. And if we use the oars correctly, the boat will take us to our destination without fail. So coming now concerning the question of team, why is it that the external physical form or the physical forms are needed when all the time you're asking us to look inside? I would like to quote what Harold Kushner once wrote in his very famous book, Who Needs God? Who Needs God? That's the title. And he says, some people can create lives out of holiness all by themselves. All by themselves. But most of us need a structure and a company of other people to do it. Hence the need for a community and organized structure. So therefore, we see that the team is nothing but the organization. And this organization brings with it a structured approach and a disciplinary code. And these two basically help us to persist with our aradhana and upasana. And therefore, we can use the board of this sakara so that we can reach the nirakara. So this organization of the team therefore plays a very critical role. It gives us that structured, disciplined code, which helps us to basically do this kind of things. I would like to conclude by basically drawing to your attention to a very important question which I'm often asked. I'm sure many students here also have been asked that question several times. In fact, maybe accused may be a right word, I think. They say it's very easy for you to talk about internalizing Swami because you have experienced Swami physically so closely. I think my fellow alumni would have also been asked that question. So I have also been asked that question. And the question is, it's very easy to talk about internalizing Swami within us through our external sadhana because you have experienced Swami's physical form. I can only recall Swami's discussion with an elderly devotee to offer as an explanation to this. Now, a devotee was asking Swami, question was, Swami, how can we internalize Swami when we are far away from Swami's physical form? This person used to live abroad and he was so infatuated and so attached to Swami in his physical form that he asked Swami, once in a while I come to see you. How can I internalize Swami's form within me so that I can bear the separation when I'm away from the physical form? And Swami replied, trying to find divinity without first perfecting humanity. Trying to find divinity without first perfecting humanity is like seeking a PhD after LKG. Trying to see divinity without perfecting humanity is like trying to get a PhD immediately after LKG without going through school and college. It is very important to first infuse ourselves with the sublime feeling of divinity. We have to take that step. We have to infuse that feeling in us. So we have to infuse that sublime feeling of divinity in us through our sadhana. So that is very important. So the elderly gentleman continued. He said, Swami, okay, fine. How do we infuse this sublime feeling of divinity in us through our sadhana? When will we know that we have infused it? Now comes a beautiful answer. Swami said, you will never know. He said, you will never know. Then everybody was stunned. We were standing there. We were also stunned. You will never know. Then Swami said, you will never know it. It will silently happen on its own. But for this, all you have to do is obey what Swami is telling you. That is all. Obey what is Swami is telling us, and certainly behind us, without a knowledge, that sublime feeling of divinity slowly starts enveloping us. We will never know it. We will never see how it is happening, but it will happen. Swami has assured us of that. So the devotee went further. He said, Swami, what is it that we have to obey? You are saying that we have to obey you to have the sublime feeling of divinity. So what is it exactly that we have to obey? And but for that, all we have to do is what Swami said. Swami, what is it we have to do? Swami said, be what I expect you to be, an ideal. Now, there's a story behind this actually. It follows that. I didn't narrate that. When Swami was talking to a group of students who were actually graduating from the university, one of the students asked Swami, yesterday also on the 2nd of May, there was a group chat with the alumni, we discussed this. So these students asked Swami, so many years, Swami, you have given us so much of love, taught us so many things. Swami, can you tell us how we can use all this to change the world? And Swami said, don't even bother changing the world. You will go mad. That is not your responsibility. Changing the world is the God's responsibility. That is why the Avatar Purusha descends. Now comes a question that, Swami, what do we do? You have taught us so many things. Swami said, I want you to be an ideal. Live your life so ideally that you inspire 10 others around you. Tell, this is the kind of a person I want to be like. Honest, sincere, with a perfect work culture and ethics, with a soft heart, with a feeling of caring and sharing. That's the kind of a person I want to live with. So that is Swami expecting us. All the teachings, all the divine discourses, all the satsangs that you listen, please understand this is the essence that comes out of Swami's teachings. He wants us to live our lives like an ideal. So continuing, so the devotee asked Swami, what is it that we have to obey? Swami said, just be what I expect you to be. Try to be an ideal person. Your sincerity and honesty and work ethics must inspire others around to change their own lives for the better. Once you stand as an ideal, divinity starts to bloom automatically in you. How will you know that it is blooming in you? Continue. Swami says, what are the signs which we can recognize? How this divinity is blooming in us? Number one, you will feel love. You will feel love. You will want to care. You will want to share. Without the knowledge, we will start to experience an all-enveloping feeling of welfare for all. Loka samasta sukhino bhavantu. These are the symbols, these are the signs which we will develop within us that tell us that divinity is finally beginning to bloom in us. So basically what is happening here is, I would compare this process like a software update. Software update always takes place in the background. We don't know. It will find its own time, but it will update itself for its own, provided we give it the required permissions. Otherwise, that update will never take place. So the software update, the blooming of divinity within us is like this software update which God is providing us from his server. So one fine day, because what is the permissions we have to give? We would just have to say, Swami, we will obey you. Today we will start living our lives like an ideal. That is all the permission that is required. And the software update will begin in the background. So it's a very important aspect that we have to see. And this, I believe, is the need of the hour. Instead of discussing endlessly about this, that, and this, all we can try to do is expect to be living our lives like ideals. And one fine day, we will find ourselves enveloped by that sweet fragrance of divinity that's beginning to bloom within us, and the feeling that we begin to care, a loka samasta sukhino bhavantu type of feeling that will envelop within us without our prompting for it. It will become a second nature to us. That is the kind of an end I think we should all aim for. And that is how I think we should look upon the entire sojourn of the physical presence of the avatar amidst us. That is what I think the avatar was all the time trying to teach us, to awaken the divinity within us and get enveloped by the fragrance of this all-enveloping divinity. I would like to conclude here. Thank you very much for giving me a patient hearing. And thank you, my dear alumni brothers, for giving me this opportunity to share my thoughts with you all. Sairam to you all.
Sairam sir, hope I am audible.
Yeah.
I think we are still, I don't know why it is 8:15. I hope you would have been still 7 o'clock. And I only feel, I think you are able to read the minds of people because probably you are answering the questions left, right, center.
Okay.
And with strong evidences that, in fact, I would urge myself and to everybody that we should watch this video several times. Probably this is enough for us to get a very good understanding about how should we lead life. That is what we should be doing, because this is exceptional, kind of explanation of Swami's message with very, very wonderful experiences, which are very thought provoking. And I think it should be, it's almost like a class that you took, life lesson taught today by you, and which are each of them, are worth going into depth and actually practicing and thinking and ruminating and, rectifying ourselves. So before we end, obviously we need to go through some of the questions which people are having. There's one question is very popular these days, that when we face an adverse situation like present scenario, immediately we get agitated. So doubts cropped up, filled our mind in this situation. And in this case, how do we focus internally apart from what is going things outside?
Let me try to answer it. I think it's more important to find out why this external situation cropped up in the first place. you know, I don't know whether it was a time of some virus. I forget what it is. It was going rampant in the world all around. And somebody was talking to Swami and they were telling Swami, Swami, what is all these viruses and all? You know, nature is really uncontrollable these days and all. Swami said, why are you blaming the virus? You must understand one thing. When man interferes with the nature's process, nature will find alternate routes. It will find alternate routes. So this expansion of the virus, what we are seeing is basically man created. Nature didn't bring it. Number two, coming to the question of when such adverse situations are coming outside, it is difficult to digest, but there is only one answer to that. And that is, if we, even this also shall pass. Like, you know, Krishna advised the Pandavas. It's a very powerful statement. This also shall pass. When we know that we cannot control what is happening outside, the best we can do is strengthen our defenses. It's always safe. When we cannot control what is affecting us from outside, the second best action is strengthen our own defenses. What are our defenses? Tolerance, confidence, hope, faith. These are all the strengths which we can strengthen in ourselves. So when we cannot control what is happening outside, it is futile to start feeling bad and spend days and hours thinking about it. Instead, let us start to think and see how we can do the best in this situation. There are hundreds of people who are basically, like Swami says, how do you make a line bigger without drawing it? You draw a bigger line around it. You draw a line and you say, how do you make this line shorter without using an eraser? Fine, you take a pencil and draw a bigger line next to it. So the question, truth here, therefore, is if you find that something is distressing us, the best way to go about it in spirituality is help those people who are in this distress. That's one of the strongest weapon we can have if we have to overcome our own depression at the situation around us. I do not have to tell you right now, because in Andhra Pradesh and Telangana, there are close to 60 plus community kitchens that are providing meals to hundreds of families. All over the country, samitis are organizing community kitchens right now, where they're providing food to people who have families and little children to feed, but have no means of feeding them. They're helping people who are walking thousands of kilometers to go back to their families, some of whom are tragically dying on the way. Satyasai organizations are opening camps, giving refreshments and water under the trees on the highways in villages for hundreds of people who are going home, returning to Sakar. And in the process, what is happening? We are doing a little bit to help those who are suffering. Are we not suffering? Yes, we are suffering. But are we going to help ourselves by feeling bad about it, depressed about it? No. Neither are we going to feel happy and this thing about it, nor is it going to help our family members. So the best way is draw a bigger line next to it. Go look for a person who is suffering more than us. Help them. Our suffering will automatically come down. So this is how I would try to answer this question. That's why I prephrased it by saying it's a little tough, but I think this is the most practical solution. Especially those of us who are exposed to Swami's teachings, let us, number one, fortify our own defenses internally by building our own faith and our own confidence and our own good feelings within us. Number two, if we are suffering, let us look for somebody who's suffering more than us and try to alleviate their suffering. Ours automatically vanishes. So this, I think, is the right way to look at not only the current situation, but every situation that unfolds in the future.
Very beautiful. In fact, I'll just take a leaf of what you explained today about the Lord Narayana experience. When we surrender to God, it is His responsibility to take care of us, and that should drive the fears completely away from us. And then the rest is history. We just offer ourselves, and Narayana Himself serves through us to the rest of the humanity. We become the channel of His grace and His blessings. So that's a very converting the adversity into opportunity in this kind of situations. So that's one. The second question is. Yeah. So when we do our duty with dharma, we face difficulties sometimes. How to overcome them?
It's a question of what we believe in. See, if we believe that the adversary who is throwing the obstacle is right, then we lose. If we believe that our strength to persist with the dharma is right, we will win. So it's a question of what we select. And one thing, like I told you, I believe very strongly is expecting a life without any obstacle is our foolishness. And number two, when we take a lesson in a class, we will have to face the examination. Nobody will give us a certificate without writing the test. So the day we decide that I'm going to do a dharmic principle, I'm going to follow this dharma, please expect obstacles to come your way. There is no other way to look at it. Obstacles will come. It is left to our fortitude and our resolution of how we are steadfast with our dharma. Trust me, God will find a way to push us out of it. But not suffering an obstacle is a foolish thought. It will be there. All we have to do is, you cannot reach PhD without completing your PG. You have to write an exam. Somebody has to create a test for us. Somebody has to evaluate us. There'll be a sickening viva voce in the process. We have to go through all of that. Only then we will get our PhD in our hands. Our authorities will shout at us. They will punish us. They will complain about us. Everything. Tell me one candidate who has got a PhD or a master's degree without being blasted by his teachers, or without being examined, or without writing exams, struggling day and night, studying hard, pages and pages of notes, going mad, forgetting our food, forgetting our drink. Tell me one person who got a degree without all this battery of obstacles coming their way. Life is like that, simple. So when we decide to follow dharma, only then these obstacles will come our way. If we decide to live a carefree life, care for nothing, we will be the happiest person on the world, but we'll be no better than an animal. So our choice. We want to progress to divinity, we have to be ready and thick-skinned enough to face these obstacles, follow dharma. You want to remain an animal? Let's be happy where we are.
Okay. The third question is about Trikarna Shuddhi. So the question is basically there is a thought to do a good act. Okay, and we take the step by requesting that I want to take up this act. So thought is there, word is also there. However, we are not been, some circumstances happen and we are not allowed to do that activity. Now the deed hasn't happened. So is that the breakage of Trikarna Shuddhi, or how do we consider that situation?
I wouldn't consider it that way. See, who decides whether time is right for the deed? Do we know the future? Do we know the past? So we are deciding based on a present understanding that, the deed is not happening, the deed is not happening. In fact, Swami very humorously used to say that, when you plant a seed, you can't expect, it's not like that Asterix comic, where you plant a seed and whoosh, a tree jumps up. It takes time. When Swami used to say, when you plant a tree, especially a mango tree, let us say, you look forward to the delicious mango fruits, you have to wait for 10 years. It takes time. So just because it is taking 10 years, you cannot say your deed has not happened. The time frame from the deed is 10 years. It will happen only after 10 years. So we should not get dispirited that when the thought comes, there is a long delay because before the word comes. After that, there's a long delay before the deed happens. Everything depends upon our karma and our thought and our resolve. Once again, I come back to patience and perseverance. So we have to persist. We have to be patient. We have to make it a point that as long as my effort is sincere, God will decide what's the right time. We have no clue about it. So we cannot expect a deed which is supposed to happen way off to suddenly take place now. This is not a magic. It is life. That is the way spirituality progresses. So whoever asks me that question, sister or brother, please don't get dispirited. Persist. We are nobody to decide which is the right time for the deed to take place. God decides. What he waits for is, are we having the patience enough to wait till then? Whether our resolve will last till then, that is all sadhana is all about. That's what I have to say.
We have still 3 minutes left. Maybe there's one more not a question, but a request. Can you share an omnipresence experience? Swami's omnipresence.
Oh, very tough.
Before we sign
You
off.
must ask me, when did I not feel it?
Any latest one, maybe to make it easy.
It's difficult to pinpoint and say because I experience it quite often actually in my daily life. Also, when I feel that things are not going my way, suddenly something happens, that tells me that my God, He's still watching me. So I would personal experience I will share as I don't narrate it generally, but that convinced me of His omniscience. It happened in my family. I have twin boys, like you very well know. Both are 10 years old. And my elder twin, I almost lost him when he was just 38 days old. He had a severe rotavirus infection and he was critical. And when we took him to the hospital, the doctors also said that it's difficult whether he'll go through the night. It was a very stressful moment. He was just 38 days old when he was born. And, I sent word to Swami in the middle of the night. Brother Satyajit was there. I'll never forget the way he acted as a channel between Swami and our family when we mattered the most. For that, I will be eternally grateful to him, Brother Satyajit. He was there with Swami at that time. And I messaged him and I said, it's very critical, Satyajit. What do you want to do? I'm desperate here. And I was surprised when he actually managed to convey that message to Swami. And in the night, he messaged me back saying that, sir, he called me back because he knew how worried I was. He said, sir, Swami told you not to get worried. He is there with you. He is watching over everything. The next few days will be tough, but he wants you to be strong because he is there. He is watching you. You don't have to worry. And yes, he also told me that when you have twins, generally, it is natural for one of the twins to suffer these health hazards, but tell him Swami is with him, he is watching, he will take care. He has to be strong at this time. And the baby bounced back. The baby bounced back. And the way he is now, you will not believe that he went through such a harrowing time. Another experience I've had with my father in 2006, when father had an attack of esophageal varices, wherein the esophageal vein in his liver burst and his entire internal anatomy was filled with the blood which was oozing out. And in 2006, Diwali night, I was in the hostel. Students were bursting crackers and enjoying themselves. So I was at 10 o'clock, 10:10 in the night. So I was just basically sending all the students back to the room, telling enough, you can burst the crackers tomorrow morning. It's already 10:10 in the night. I got a call from my brother-in-law who told me that, your dad is critical. I think you better start and come. So there were no drivers. There was no taxi. Once again, I requested Brother Satyajit. And Satyajit got back the message and he said, Sir, Swami told you not to hurry and go back. He said he will talk to you tomorrow. You stay back. And father, who was critical in ICU, the next morning, Swami saw me. He spoke to me. He told me not to worry. Gave me 3 packets of vibhuti. And he told me, you put it on your father. Father was in ICU, critical. You're not even allowed to step into the ICU, let alone if I tell I want to put vibhuti, they will drive you out. So when I went the next day, I reached by evening, the doctors told me that already they had given him 7 units of blood. The blood was just not stopping, leaking. Somewhere inside he was losing blood and they didn't know where it was because I had to do an endoscopy. And his hemoglobin count was already less than 6. You cannot give anesthesia to a person whose hemoglobin is less than 6. Any doctors in the group, you know how dangerous it is. So they had to wait for the bleeding to stop, but the bleeding was not stopping. 1 day, 2 days. Luckily, the doctor was actually a very spiritual person. I told him, Sir, Baba has given me vibhuti. I would like to apply it on my father. He says, medically, there's at least nothing we can do until the bleeding stops. You go ahead and try spirituality. So I applied vibhuti on him. And for 3 days, we waited. On the night of the 3rd day, just like Swami promised, he had given me 3 packets of vibhuti. So on the night of the 3rd day, the bleeding stopped on its own. And the first thing is they rushed him to the hospital, operation theater. They found out where the hole was. They plugged it. And when the doctors said that he's not going to survive in 2006, he survived till 2018. He saw his grandchildren. He saw his son come back to him. He saw his family happy. He saw his daughters settled well in life. He enjoyed his grandchildren. And then in 2018, when he was sick and he was in hospital, he called and he told me, I'm peaceful. There's nothing left for me in this world. I'm ready to go if Swami calls me. And Swami took him. You know, see, omnipotent and omniscience of the Lord is experienced by different people at different levels. That's why when you ask me that, I would rather ask, you know, it is very difficult to tell when I have stopped. Oh yes, I get upset with him many times. You know, when obstacles hit my life, but I think that's the freedom he gives his children. See, if we don't get upset with him, who will? If he is not the divine mother who will forgive us, who will? I can't get upset with a stranger on the road. He's going to back me. But I can get upset with my mother. I can get upset with my Swami. No, but it's with a feeling that I'm getting upset with you because you are the only one who can answer this and you're not answering. That upset also, I think each one of us have that right. So I do get upset with it. There are times when I say, what is this you're doing to my life? I believed you, I trusted you, and I came here. What is this I'm suffering? But the next morning, again, I get up and I pray Om Sri Sai Ram. Because I know there's nobody other than him. So that is the way. So it is very difficult for me to tell you whether what is the kind of omniscience of his presence. It's very tough. Throughout my life, there are several instances where I have been experiencing him. When office, when I have a very hard day, a very hard meeting, I come back, I suddenly discover an auto in front of me with a sticker of Swami, wife here when I'm here. In Hyderabad, there are millions of autos. Why should this auto with that sticker appear in front of me? You answer that question. Now you want to know what omniscience? That is omniscience. Sometimes you are so sick and tired, you know, and you're sitting, your car is waiting at the traffic signal, and I roll down the window to let some fresh air in. And you know, one song from the auto comes next to me, Sai Nath Tere Hazaro Haath. When did an auto play this song? Tell me. They play only the latest film songs. But here was an auto standing next to me playing the song Sai Nath Tere Hazaro Haath. So these are the subtle ways in which he lets us know about our omniscience. When we say omniscience, therefore, my brothers and sisters, don't expect a bombastic miracle to happen. The most subtle indications of his omniscience are always the most silent. They're always happening around us. We have to recognize that. That's my answer. Time is also running out.
No, absolutely brilliant. You know, not one. In fact, you gave us 3 experiences on the same expectation of one of the attendees, and grateful to you. I think your time is up, but I think again it was probably a. There's no word to say what is the good word to use for this session, but it was a spiritual class, a lot of life lessons, and very beautiful. I don't think so. We are satisfied with just this. We would see this video maybe several times to absorb all the important messages that you have given, and I think they are very practical for us to implement in these times. So heartfelt gratitude on behalf of all of us, entire group of all the devotees and across the world who are listening currently. So for spending this time, in fact, preparing this, getting all it, it's a lot of work to get all the experiences in one place, and preparing the food and dishing out to us the ready-made delicious meal that you gave us today. And so heartfelt gratitude for your efforts and time and sharing this experiences and messages. With this, I think we should close. Maybe we can have Samasta Loka 3 times and offer our gratitude to Swami as well for making this happen. It's not easy. He says, unless you have a prapti, you can't listen or think about him. So his blessing is on all of us. And his presence was very much felt throughout this 1.5 hours. So let us end this with Samasta Loka and close the session. Sai Ram.
Samasta Loka Sukhino Bhavantu. Samasta Loka Sukhino Bhavantu. Samasta Loka Sukhino Bhavantu. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. जय बोलो भगवान श्री सत्य साई बाबा जी की जय। जय साई राम।